Good evening, everybody, and welcome to our May 20th, 2026 Board of Douglas County Commissioners 5:30 business meeting. For those of you who are with us in person, paper copies of the agenda are available on the table by the entrance. We also have the full packet with all available materials on our website. Reviewing our full agenda, first we'll consider our consent agenda, which we have 5 items on this evening, after which we will have general public comment. We welcome general public comment for addressing issues that are not on today's agenda, but otherwise related to county business. Given our limited time and the need to have an orderly and efficient meeting, we apply certain rules regarding public comments. We will do our best to enforce these rules consistently and without regard to the point of view expressed by the speaker. Each speaker will be limited to a total of 3 minutes of speaking time. However, we will accept public comment of any length in writing. Individual speakers may not donate unused time to unused time to other speakers. All comments must address topics within the jurisdiction of the County Commission, and we reserve the right to mute and remove any speaker whose comments are threatening, aggressively hostile, or belligerent. Campaigning for public office during the public comment period is not allowed. Please give your full name and residence for our meeting minutes if comfortable doing so. And please address your comments directly to the commission. We will hear from people who are here in person first, then we will look to our Zoom meeting attendees. Please plan to use the raise your hand function if you are online and wish to provide your public comment virtually. Please also know that comments received by the commission during our meetings do not necessarily represent the views of Douglas County government, but we value the input. We also don't usually respond to general public comment on the spot. But if you leave your contact information with county staff, we will try to get any specific questions answered that we can. After general public comment concludes, we will move on to our regular business agenda for tonight. There are 2 items on our regular business agenda. For each one, we will hear from staff or an applicant or community partner first, followed by questions from the commission directly of staff and our guests. Then we will open the floor for public comment that is relevant to that specific item. Once public comment is concluded, we'll bring the item back to the commission for any further discussion and a vote on any action items. Lastly, a recording of this meeting will be available on the county's YouTube page and website. And with that, I'll also just make a short announcement that some of you who've been here with us before might have noticed a change in seating arrangement, and it occurred to the county commission recently that there's no assigned seating per se. You'll see me sit here as chair, but folks might switch it up otherwise. So just FYI for those of you who will be joining us for future meetings too. With that, commissioners, any items on the consent agenda that anybody wishes to pull for further discussion or questions? Okay, seeing none, is there anybody in the public who wishes to pull anything from the consent agenda? Seeing none, we'll bring it back to the commission for motions. A motion.
I move to approve consent agenda items 1.1 through 1.5.
Second.
Moved and seconded. All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Great, that passes unanimously. Thank you, commissioners. With that, we'll move right into general public comment. Is there anybody here today who wishes to provide general public comment about any items not on today's agenda? All right, seeing nobody stand up in the building. Do we have any virtual hands, Sarah? Okay, we will close general public comment and we will move right along into our regular business agenda and start with item 3.1. Am I turning this over to, it looks like I'm turning it over to Bob.
Good evening, commissioners. This evening, as is clear in the packet, we're coming back to an issue which really started in the 2026 budget process, where Bert Nash requested an anticipated need for $1.25 million. Came back around on that during the budget process. The commission's decision was to wait until we had more clarity from Bert Nash to revisit that question between the budget request and the request in the end of December 2025. That request, Bert Nash lowered that request to $1 million, and the question before you is now whether or not $700,000 would be allocated from the line that was created in the budget for $1 million for one-time funds for solvency concerns within the crisis system. As I outlined, or as staff outlined in the AIR, that request now represents a 40. I apologize. I'm having trouble with my vision today. It's a 44% increase in the county's 2025 TRC funding allocation, but it's a reduction from the original 63%. So just giving you some numbers and percentage for perspectives. Staff feel through conversations with Burton Ash that one of the important issues at stake here is a reallocation or a change to how CCBHC revenue is applied to the TRC. When CCBHC came into existence in 2023, the assumption was that CCBHC funds would be spread out across an organization so that the organization will be able to fund adequately all of the programs that that agency has at in their budget. What has changed in this situation and through the presentations that Burton Ash has shared is after looking at the figures, the number and percentage of clients that are coming to the TRC are significantly lower than Medicaid clients. They're significantly lower than the number of clients and the percentage of clients that go to Burton Ash proper is one of the terms we've used for. So what is happening here, one of the implications of this request would be that fee-for-service revenue from Burton Ash CCBHC revenue would be allocated more at a rate of 38.5%, which is more aligned with what the expense at TRC actually is, or what the level of uncompensated care is at TRC. Another thing that's happened since December is that Burton Ash has shared with the county, as requested, program-specific budgets for all of the programs that it has. And one of the mutual discoveries through that process and the benefits of that process is it has shown, and to both our organizations, that there are some programs that are running at a deficit, and there are other programs that have previously run at a deficit because of CCBHC leveraging that are now running at a profit. One of those, not a profit, but ahead of budget. One of those programs is RAP. Another program is Transitions. And so what the county and Burton Ash have talked about is, as we approach budget, as we continue on through the service agreement in 2026, that we redirect and consider redirecting some of the allocations that were based on assumptions of budget deficits toward programs that have actual deficits. One of those programs is the Mobile Response Team. And the Mobile Response Team actually has an operating gap of over $1 million. So examples of things we continue to discuss through this process is, does it make sense, given the surplus or the percentage of ahead of budget at RAP, that we move those dollars into, and other pieces of the surplus into a specific fund to address uncompensated care within the crisis system programs, since those are essential programs required by CCBHC that at the moment, given the way in which the county and the state are funding those programs, the impact of that is, the essential services that were supported by the sales tax initially are actually running. It's not just TRC that's running at a deficit. It's TRC, it's MRT. There are needs within supportive housing outside of transitions. And so I think we're at a point, and I invite Burton Ash to comment on that as well. I believe we're at a point where both of our agencies have clearer, transparent understandings of what these programs actually cost, where the risks are for Burton Ash as they continue to try to address significant funding gaps that emerged at the end of 2025 and into 2026. So with that, that's the briefing from a staff's perspective, and we're going to invite Bert Nash up. This is Dr. Watkins, CEO of Bert Nash, and Danny Waters, who's the Chief Financial Officer for Bert Nash.
Hi. Edwards.
I didn't
Danny
even-
Edwards?
I didn't even notice.
Danny Waters is another person.
Yeah, that's fine.
Hi, my name is Kirsten Watkins. I'm the CEO of Bert Nash. Thank you so much for having us here tonight to come back and discuss our 2026 supplemental funding request for TRC. We are here because the Treatment and Recovery Center is an incredibly innovative and valuable resource for our community that we co-created with the county. Although there are many challenges and opportunities for growth and evolution, at this point, it's very clear from the feedback from our community partners, from clients and families who utilize services at TRC, and from the third-party consultants report that the TRC is working and that it's an essential option for the well-being of our community members. It's also highly utilized. In the first 5 months of this year, TRC provided care to 681 distinct individuals in a mental health crisis. In 2025, we served 1,612 distinct individuals in a mental health crisis. We obviously have had many discussions amongst us about 2026 funding, and we are asking for clarity tonight on the status of our funding request to ensure that we can continue services for the remainder of this year. Our sincere intention is in this partnership is an open and honest and forthcoming discussion. And we only ask for supplemental funding when the need to exceed our base funding is necessary. As Bob mentioned, it's clear that our shared original understanding of the estimates about the costs of operating the TRC, the payer mix that we could expect, and the fee-for-service revenue have not actualized in the way that was predicted. So we've done everything in our power at this point to provide you with every bit of information possible. Apologies in advance for the volumes of stuff we submitted. We've checked and rechecked all of our numbers. We've utilized our skills and all of the consultants to predict and prepare for the future. And we've engaged in every meeting, every requirement, every consultation asked of us. So since we were last in front of you, our goal was to return here with an updated understanding of our funding needs, not just to ask for some flat amount that we couldn't substantiate. And our goal was to engage in an open discussion about what we need financially to continue this endeavor together. We are pleased today to be able to adjust our ask to a lower amount, as Bob mentioned, based on many active efforts on our part to manage the costs and to run the TRC effectively, and based on our predictions from data from the first quarter of 2026. But no matter how much progress we've made, the gap is real and it is substantiated. I will, at this point, pass the mic to Danny Edwards and eventually potentially Chris Cohart, our CFO and our consultant from SSC Advisors, who know these numbers inside and out. And we look forward to any questions and discussions going forward. Share this. Oh, it is shared. Look at you.
Bob gave me the rundown. Hi, Danny Edwards. Thank you for letting us come back to you tonight to ask or to get some clarity around our TRC supplemental funding request for 2026. As Dr. Watkins mentioned, we've been up to a lot since I was last here in December, and feel confident in the number presented that Bob had mentioned prior to us coming up here of $700,000. So revised down from that original 1.25 million, the 1 million in December. And again, as time goes on and we have more data and we continue to understand the operational uniqueness of the TRC, we're able to ultimately make better forecasts and planning efforts and all of that. So I have a slide deck prepared. Even though it's 10 slides, we're probably going to touch on like 2. But again, as Dr. Watkins mentioned, I'm not trying to flood the zone with information, but I do hope that it ultimately feels as if we are trying to be transparent, which we are, and that we've dug into this a lot. I use the analogy of untangling necklaces in December. That is still true. Some necklaces have broken free. Others are still very, very stubborn. But, day in, day out, we're doing what we can to dig into those and to get a better sense of, again, how crisis services fits into our continuum of care. So with that, just gonna jump ahead a little bit. So, okay, what we've been up to. So again, since December, we've continued our work with SSC and Hassey and Long. We've engaged with the TRC consultant. We have had an intensive optimization training with our EHR system. We have extended that engagement with that trainer and expert to continue to work through billing reconfiguration and issue resolution related to, ultimately some initial RCM setup issues. We have kicked off a pilot project related to presumptive eligibility for clients. We've completed another year of cost report submissions. Of course, as Bob mentioned, program by program budget or income statements, both related to the programs that the county helps support as well as internal. We actually this afternoon resubmitted our 2027 community partner budget submission for both BNC and TRC. And so there's been a lot of work done, and this is in addition to what keeps kind of the home fires burning and Bert Nash chugging along. So through this, I know in my short but quick 8 months at Bert Nash, I have certainly learned a lot. There's never a dull moment, and there's a lot left to learn. But again, feel confident in what we're presenting here tonight. So with that, again, just to set the basis of this discussion, not because I think everyone is really excited to listen to anyone talk about accounting methodology. Ultimately, so the county, of course, uses cash accounting, and Bert Nash uses accrual accounting. So sometimes when speaking with each other or reading each other financial statements, there are what I like to refer to as translation issues. And so, again, as part of digging into our TRC and broader BNC finances, this has just been an important point of conversation between us. And so I just wanted to set the stage that, again, as you look at Bert Nash or TRC income statements, revenue is not synonymous with cash. So again, while revenue is what we earn for the services provided, ultimately, beyond that, it's what we get in the door once our claims are submitted and what comes in the door. So I just want to set the stage with that. I will skip over the very exciting topic of deferred revenue. Sorry if anyone was looking forward to that. Happy to talk about it afterwards. But ultimately, to jump right ahead to our supplemental asks. So with what I just said, again, revenue is not cash. I felt it was important that as we have essentially 4 months of data for 2026, we plugged in those 4 months of actuals and then updated any expense or revenue items that we think will be adjusted throughout the year, either up or down. And you'll see on the left side, ultimately that comes out to forecasting a net loss of approximately $90,000. Okay, so why am I up here asking for $700,000? Again, if we go over to the right side in the cash forecast, so ultimately payments in the door, right? So if you take those top 3 numbers on the left side, it comes out to about $900,000. So fee for service, again, what are the cost of, what's the value of the services provided? What are discounted services based off of sliding fee scale, contractual adjustments related to commercial insurance? Again, all of that ultimately comes up to a number of about, I think it's like $950,000. I have it somewhere in here. That's what is able to be collected for the TRC. But ultimately, what we've seen through last year and this year, we've seen about 36% of that $950,000 come in the door. So of the almost million, million of revenue that we expected, we're getting about a third of that. So that changes things quite significantly. Ultimately, the supplemental fee-for-service revenue that BNC provides based off of kind of the profit sharing model that the CCBHC model is, that number stays the same from left to right. So as Bob, he mentioned a number, 38.5%. So that was ultimately when we set our TRC budget last year, that is the number we said we would contribute. We said we would contribute 38.5% of revenue for the TRC. And so that stayed the same. Ultimately, that isn't sustainable. But again, in wanting to be true to our word for 2026, that number up there, that $4.5 million is representative of the 38.5% that Bert Nash said it would supplement. So you take it all the way down, again, expenses, that's where you have this gap essentially of real dollars, which comes out to just above $700,000. So ultimately, that's what we're asking for here tonight. Again, as Dr. Watkins mentioned, we've gone back to the drawing board many a times. What does it take to run the TRC? We're about as efficient and as lean as you can get. But ultimately, we can't scrimp and save and search the couch cushions for any more than we have to give. And so that's what we're back here tonight asking for. With that, I'll pause. I'm sure there are plenty of questions and I'm happy to field them.
Go ahead, Commissioner Dorsey.
In your annual budget for the rest of the year, what is your assumption on staffing? Full staffing or partial or?
Okay, so year to date, if you're talking about FTE, full-time equivalent numbers, we're running about 81% of what we budgeted. So, but there's still 100% of the hours that need covered. So ultimately, what do? People work overtime, and overtime is more expensive. So from a salaries perspective, while we're running at 81% in terms of FTE, we see about 88% from the salary perspective. So you can see that like a 7% difference between the two, understanding that it's not an equal difference of like, okay, less headcount, less cost, because ultimately the nature of the TRC from a safety perspective, staffing ratio perspective, those slots are still filled.
Shifts are covered.
Yeah, shifts are covered every day. So while I think last time we talked about the challenging work that it is to work at a crisis center. So there is higher turnover. We're still seeing that, but we are making every effort to again continue to post those positions as they become available, recruit, retain to the degree possible. So I would imagine we will still run about 81 to 84% FTE for the remainder of the year.
The other question I had, I guess it's a joint question for both county staff and Bert Nash, but you're both operating under an operating contract that both parties agreed that the county would only furnish $1.6 million per year for the TRC. Have both parties agreed to adjust that?
Yeah, we would need to adjust the addendum on the agreement for this. Is that the answer to your question?
I mean, the operating contract for the TRC is up for renewal later this year, and we'll both come to the table to have good faith, transparent conversations about what it takes to run the TRC.
I'll defer other questions.
Sounds good.
I guess one of my basic questions is, we set aside these funds as one-time funds, kind of solvency funds, and I know that's the lens that you're using here. As we're working between Burt Nash staff and county staff to kind of make the county funding that's available for Burt Nash into the right buckets so that they can be utilized, within that process, will these truly be one-time dollars to get kind of back on track, or is it that cash versus revenue issue that's going to come up again?
Yeah, I would say certainly it's our intention that this is a one-time supplemental request. We did have to submit, like Danny mentioned, our 2027 budget for next year, which we included it in that budget, not knowing the status of the ask tonight. So our intention fully is for it to be a one-time ask.
And so if this works through to a yes in this amount for the 2026, then the 2027 supplemental gets pulled?
Yes.
Okay, thanks.
I want to say one caveat that Bob also mentioned in the staff report, it's worth acknowledging, is we can't technically predict our funding for the state and also potential changes in our PPS rate. So that is always going to be an unknown for us. And I just feel like I need to say that, but our entire intention and commitment is to remove that ask for 2027 if that is fulfilled this evening.
Dr. Watkins, I know it was mentioned earlier, but will you reiterate to the best of your knowledge what the timeline for knowing that will be and your ability to forecast those numbers? Sorry, Danny.
Sure. Yeah. So again, talk about a learning curve. So as I mentioned in the what we've been up to kind of section, we submitted our 2025 cost report. So that this is just kind of a year where we're required to submit, but ultimately we don't see a big swing based on that. So we will have a new rate as of 1/1/2027, but that's just kind of an inflationary adjustment based off of MEI. Ultimately, the cost report that we submit next April 15th for 2026, based on actuals we experienced this year, then in around the Q3 timeframe, so fall of 2027, we will ultimately learn our new PPS rate. And at that time, if it's adjusted down, we would be required to repay the difference and ultimately then carry that through at the end of 2027. And just to make matters even more complicated, 1/1/2028, there'll be a slight inflationary adjustment upwards. So you're well into your 3/4 of the way into 2027 when we learn what the 2027 rate really is.
Yeah, that's helpful. Thank you for pacing it out. And I think it just helps illustrate part of the complexity here. And that if I'm tracking all of that right, in your preparation for the 2028 budget request, you will not know that new PPS rate yet. You maybe have some prediction of it, maybe, but there's still a significant amount of unknowns so that this time next year, you still won't be beyond that inflationary, bump that happens. So that's helpful context.
One thing I will mention while, I typed this sentence a couple hours ago before I submitted the 2027 resubmission, as we've ultimately I mentioned the optimization training related to the electronic health record with our revenue cycle management team. As we reconfigure our billing processes and things like that, we do expect to see some gain from that. It is impossible to predict that they would, happily offset each other. And so in that 2027 submission, if you were to look at the fee-for-service revenue line, it stays flat. I just don't know enough to make a guess either way. And so, yes, we'll know more come the 2028 budget submission next year about how RCM work is humming along and hopefully kind of figure out what equilibrium actually looks like there, like what is normal. But yes, the PPS rate will still remain a question mark.
For this particular supplemental ask, is it meant to close some of those program-specific funding gaps that are mentioned? Okay, so that is a separate...
Yes, that's a separate process and separate discussion related to our addendum for the 2026 and then also ultimately our 2027.
Yeah, our 2026 amendment to the agreement, which will mirror or be very close to what they're going to submit for what they've submitted for 2027, gets at those program specific gaps. And so we would be realigning funding from RAP to a new line item for crisis system uncompensated care so that they could access that. Right now under RAP, they are not going to be able to access those funds because they can't bill me for something they don't have an expense for. So I'm hoping we can take care of that. This would be a specific, I'm not building this into an actuals. You would be giving them an allocation, I mean, for $700,000 one time, unless you all decided to treat that differently. But that's how staff has viewed that this supplemental would be a one-time $700,000 payment and would not be tied to the metrics, would not be tied to the program-specific budgets for this calendar year.
Okay, so I just want to make sure I also understood what was stated a moment ago when you said that if this is funded, did I also hear that you would potentially, depending on how the KDAD's ask goes, that you would pull the 27?
Yes.
Okay, but if you,
This supplemental request for the TRC. Yes.
okay, and is that also tied to the funding gaps? Or is that,
We don't believe, a little bit of a preview of what you're going to see for the 27 budget process.
I just want to make sure that if
Yeah,
this
we're
is-
not anticipating any program-specific gaps for 26 and 27 at this point.
And I would like to acknowledge that we're able to come to those decisions and make those proposals because of really extensive work and collaboration with the county administration. This has not happened before to this level of us understanding the program-specific budgets and being able to address where there are gaps and where there are not gaps. And I think be as creative as possible. And props to Brooke over there and obviously Sarah and Bob for helping us navigate those discussions.
okay, so
One,
I guess what I'm grappling with is that I'm hearing that by end of year, there could potentially be $1 million deficit, I think is what I heard or initially. So we're like at 700,000, close to 900
At the
potentially.
beginning of this year, yes. That
Yes.
became in December. That was our estimate at that time based on the information that we had at that time. And today, we feel really good about the fact that we've been able to sharpen that pencil and be able to come with a more specific amount, particularly based on that Q1 2026 data.
Okay, but then it's could potentially be like around 900. Is that what I heard?
No, that's where they started with at the
You
beginning
started
of the
with,
year.
okay,
Yeah.
all right. And, but then by end of year, we'll see kind of where that will be by the time you land by end of year.
Yes.
Okay, and then if the supplemental is approved, you could potentially then pull the 27 request.
We will.
You will, okay. But then where does that leave potentially your funding gaps?
We don't anticipate that they will have funding gaps on the programs that specifically the county funds for 2026 or 2027. And that is because we are realigning funding that they have not been able to access because it's been tied on programs that have not had expenses to programs where there are the gaps. So in addition, we're doing that alignment already as a
Okay,
part of our 26 budget service agreement amendment process. I really believe that is going to access, we're putting $700,000 of funding that is available for uncompensated crisis care at the TRC and with the mobile response team. That's happening in addition to this. So I'm not in, I would, and then given that they're running 88% of budget, I think we feel as confident as you ever feel about anything in finance that they're going to be in decent position by the end of the year.
okay, so the funding gaps, that's already going to happen in the background or
Yes.
is already happening in the background, so we don't have to worry about something being pulled that could potentially leave gaps open if this particular request is honored.
For this current
Okay.
calendar year and for this current legislative cycle.
Okay,
Every year is a new year.
Yeah.
okay. I just
So
wanted to
the
clarify.
supplemental request we submitted as part of the 2027 submission is specific to TRC. What Commissioner Reed asked about is related to the broader PPS rate, which ultimately is a B and C proper holistic, systemic problem and not one we're alone in. It is something that CCBHCs across the state would also be grappling with. So again, there's no supplemental request related to any potential gaps that may happen there simply because it is just a question mark. There's nothing concrete to be able to get to a number to ask for anything. So
May I share one piece of information that I think might be helpful? The shared understanding of where there were unexpected surpluses for this year that didn't exist last year or any years prior, which are an example of how CCBHC, through DCO agreements with other providers, in this case the school district, have actually changed the whole cycle, the financial model for RAP. That's great news. That news came to us 6 weeks ago, and both agencies have been working through to say, what does this news, these discoveries, as the result of the curiosity and the serious work that the financial team has done at Bert Nash, what does that mean? Where are the opportunities for that? And I think the answer here is we know what we know for 2026, and we know what Bert Nash is committed to for 2027.
Bob, while you got your microphone on, I got a question for you. On the first or second slide, it said the outside consultant review was complete. I think we've seen a preliminary report. We haven't seen a final report. They're probably talking complete in the fact that they don't have to interview people there anymore. Do you anticipate any onerous, costly requirements coming out of a final report that they may not be anticipating?
No, what I would say is the review is completed. An interim report has been issued, and the final report will be issued on May 30th. The consultants are very confident that they will be able to meet the deadline. That report, which none of us have seen, will have specific recommendations of options and opportunities that Bert Nash or the county could collectively or individually decide to pursue so that this work that has been very fruitful, I would argue, and I know this is not an arguing forum, but I would argue that this collaboration in conjunction with this consultant has yielded some results in terms of understanding, similar to what the financial reviews and consultation and support has been happening from SSC. So I think after May 30th and into June, we will have more discovery and understanding as a result of the fact that we will have a complete report that will show all the pieces of the puzzle that have been reviewed, and where at that point the consultants think there are opportunities for both organizations individually and collectively to make the next set of decisions that need to be made for the TRC to be operating as efficiently as possible, as effectively, as clinically effectively as possible, and going back to deliver the right care in the right setting at the right time.
I'll ask the staffing question again, if that's all right. Because one of the things I noticed in your budget versus actuals for the first of 3 months, 3 months that I have there is that it was like $750,000 down for expenses because of positions that aren't filled. And I know that when over the years, as we've had TRC conversations, there's been a lot of different staffing levels kind of built into budgets. So was that budget built into like an aspirational capacity? Or are those all positions like we're desperate to fill them and need them to be filled and need to be maxing out that salary budget line and just we haven't been able to?
Sure. So I would say that like I had mentioned earlier when Commissioner Dorsey asked the question around full-time equivalent staffing, we're running about 81%. So that's 81% of the absolute minimum, but ideal staffing for TRC to ensure, again, proper shift coverage, limited overtime, like I mentioned, which is more expensive, as well as prevent staff burnout, things like that. So ultimately, some work that was done prior to the finalization of the 2026 TRC budget last fall, that there was a number that was whittled down from. So the number that we're running 81% of is the aspirational target.
And is that 81% of positions and hours filled for just the TRC, or is that kind of organization wide?
TRC.
Because the,
Another piece of information that the county receives for understanding, Bert Nash and TRC submit a monthly report. This is one line in that data comprehensive dashboard that is reported to the county that shows a couple of things. So one piece here is overall what percentage of staffing is filled, right, month to month. And that has trended around 81 to 84, fluctuated. So the goal when we opened TRC together in 2023 was that, 20% would be expected. The real place where the challenge exists is turnover, right? Staff turnover creates all types of churn, all kinds of unanticipated expense fluctuations. If the turnover in a given month or over a 3-month period is among a particular group like behavioral health specialists, the cost implications of that are considerably smaller than if you lose a medical director or if you lose an APRN. And so that just kind of fluctuates. What's been consistent since we opened is 62%, between 59 and 62% is the amount of turnover. And so understanding why is that? Where are the opportunities to reduce that? What is the goal to shorten that number? And how does that compare? I mean, that's from my perspective, how does that compare to the overall cost with other crisis centers?
some of that may come out through the review process also, some suggestions on how to reduce turnover.
And if I might say too, that one line dollar amount is influenced heavily by one position, which Bob mentioned, which is the vacant medical director, which is the highest salary of our entire agency. So it is skewing that number just a little bit based on one position.
That makes a lot of sense.
Yeah.
So as I'm looking at the organization-wide budget, most of that variance is the TRC and much of that variance is that one medical director.
Yes.
Okay. So overall overall Bert Nash doesn't have the same struggles with turnover and vacancies that we see in TRC.
No, our turnover amount is aligned with industry standards and has been sometimes below, sometimes above, depending on the season, but it has been very aligned with industry standard.
And I would imagine that the consultants review will kind of help figure out, like, I know TRC is a whole different beast, but like, why is that and how can it be optimized?
Yes, and we've had great discussions about that already with the consultants, and that has been an area where we've explored some options and brainstormed some options as well.
Thanks.
Thanks for being here and for asking questions. I'm looking at page 23 of the materials that you provided. And on there, it talks about TRC fee for service revenue. And there's not actuals recorded for 23, 24, or 25. There's budget for 23, 24, and 25, but not actuals. Can you tell me why?
You're looking at the deferred revenue overview? It's colorful.
Yeah.
Okay. Yes. So 23, 24, 25, I would say that is a limitation of some of our revenue cycle management complexities. So ultimately, again, I'll borrow my old phrase, this is going to come back to haunt me. We can't quite untangle what those numbers are. So you'll see them more so in the line below it, which is the TRC PPS revenue. So we can't quite tease those out.
Can you say what you just said again? I didn't quite catch that.
Yes. So for
PPS,
2023 and 2024, where you see a amount in the budget column for TRC fee for service revenue, but you don't see actuals. Ultimately, the TRC PPS revenue, the dollars collected from a Medicaid clientele basis, we can pull that out, but we couldn't tease out the commercial piece, which would ultimately be the other line item. So it's just a mismatch in our systems, basically.
Okay.
So we just can't get to that granularity historically, but can obviously on a present day and go forward basis.
The county could provide the monthly income and expense statements that have been submitted monthly since TRC opened. So we could provide the year-end summaries. And so you would have those numbers of what happened in actuals in the eyes of the administration that submitted those reports.
So do you know, and it's okay if you don't, like what the actual fee for service percentage that you're getting at the TRC? You said it was low. Do you know what
Yes.
percentage that is?
Yes. So again, if we turn our attention up here to the left side, so you see TRC payments cash, that 347 number, that is ultimately 36% of the top three numbers on the left side. So again, fee for service wise at the TRC generate $6.4 million, but you then have the discounted services and contractual adjustments based on sliding fee scale, uncompensated care, and then commercial insurance. So that 6.4 suddenly becomes about 950,000. And of that 950,000, what we've got in the door so far this year is that $347,000.
Thank you. And it sounded like as your electronic health record improves and your billing practices improve, that you will expect more, but you said you were going to keep it flat. Is that what you said?
Sure. So yes. So I am cautiously optimistic. I tend to err on the conservative budget side of things or forecasting side of things, but from a revenue cycle management perspective, I feel confident that the work we've done over the last couple months to engage with our EHR, as well as the ongoing work to kind of fix some of the outstanding issues, will positively impact ultimately dollars in the door at the end of the day. However, I can't quantify that quite yet. And so when I'm looking at 2027 and the revenue, I just kept it flat because while the PPS could cause a big swing, RCM could cause another big swing when we've kind of right-sized and fixed some of these RCM issues.
So what I'm understanding is you really have two numbers that are very variable.
Yes.
And while you're hoping for your fee numbers to go up.
Yes.
Do you have a goal for that?
I do not.
Okay.
Mhm.
You're hoping your fee numbers go up. PPS could go down.
Yes.
We'll have a further conversation in July about maybe how to prepare for that
Sure.
PPS rate, but
Yep.
that's not the conversation for today. Today, the conversation that you're saying is, if I understand correctly, like we have less people paying at the TRC than we expected.
Yes.
And then that swings my question to Bob to go back to history, because my recollection is when we first looked at the TRC, we expected costs to be higher as a county than it was because we didn't have that CCBHC. Can you talk me through that history a little bit?
Yes, and I have a specific answer to the question because I'm looking at the dashboard that Tim submits every month. And so in 2020, so if we're talking about uninsured, uncompensated care, right, which is there's no payer source. So what does that percentage look like? In 2024, it was 48%. In 2025, it was 40%. And in the first quarter of this year, it's at 47%. Okay, so that has stayed consistent at least 40% of the clients that come into TRC are uninsured, uncompensated care. So that is the metric that we're thinking and we believe we should be tracking in addition to that related to how the PPS rate is fluctuating. Am I understanding that correctly?
Yep, that's correct.
And now can you give me a little bit of history, Bob?
Yes.
Yes. So back when we first started talking about the TRC and how we were going to fund it, maybe I remember this incorrectly. We always thought it was going to be more expensive than our first couple of years. It seemed like it was less, and that was because we didn't have CCBHC dollars. Am I remembering that correctly? And if not,
Not
please
exactly.
correct.
Okay. So what I would say is there were several variables that resulted in the TRC's actuals being less than what had been budgeted and being less than what the county anticipated it would have to spend. Okay, so those variables are who's coming in the door and what are their payer sources, right? Another fluctuation and another piece of this is, I just lost my train of thought, but I promise you I'll get it, is that the general assumption of how CCBHC would benefit a major program like TRC at Burton Ash is that CCBHC funds would pay for 60% of a thing, you'll remember, across the agency. And so the onus on the partners or other funding sources would be to be able to supply 40%. What Bert Nash is showing you is what's actually been happening is that across the agency, the CCBHC service revenue has actually been 53%. So a 7% shift in a $40 million operation is a big shift. Another shift is that what the state is supporting, the percentage that the state is supporting in this overall model, it has not fluctuated, except year to year, KDADS has provided a one-time year supplemental, and so all of those things are in fluctuation. But staff and Bert Nash have been talking about if we focused on that uncompensated care, because that's I would call it the largest, most painful Achilles heel in trying to predict and run this. That would at least allow Bert Nash to know that when somebody comes through the door, there's been a part of the allocation that is dedicated to making sure that that doesn't become a huge unpredicted gap. What the baseline data tells us, since we've gathered it from the beginning, is that's actually been about 40% of the people. So it's actually about, right? It's almost exactly opposite what our aspirational understanding was of how CCBHC would impact this. Does that answer the question?
Yes, I think so. And then, and I think this is a fact that I just don't understand it. So keep helping me. This idea of funding as it goes instead of, is that just because we think that you're recommending that our job is to cover that uninsured cost?
We're not recommending, staff and Bert Nash, neither of us are recommending anything at this point.
Okay.
Right? The question before us is what about this supplemental request right now for the rest?
Great.
But what I would say is, can you ask your question again? Because again, I just love.
I don't know. I'll do my best.
Yeah.
Because you said something that made me go, I shouldn't have asked this question too.
I would say that we have said we want to be the last payer.
Mhm.
At Douglas County wants to be the last payer. So we want to get any sort of fee for service that we can get in the door. We want to make sure we maximize our Medicaid revenue under CCBHC as much as possible. We'll gladly accept any help from the state of Kansas, which is not what we anticipated when we opened the TRC. We had no idea that we'd be getting $3 million a year from KDADS. And then we want to be the last payer.
Yeah.
And
But I
the
don't,
onus-
but that is different than saying any uncompensated care,
Right.
Commissioner.
Okay.
And the onus on the operator of TRC is that TRC must run at a zero balance. And Bert Nash has done that as the operator of the TRC. That's a pretty tough commitment to make, given all this fluctuation. And I think this is the only program that the county is funding that has that piece on the expectation of the program, is that there will be a zero balance.
Okay. And maybe my last question, sorry, commissioners, but if we get to the end of the year, and I know we do this, and we see instead of a 36% fee rate, we took in a 40% fee rate, the monies that we gave here to cover the difference, that stays with Bert Nash. Is that correct?
No. We invoice on a monthly basis based on actuals, so we don't take a dollar more than we need. So while you could recommend to ultimately give us or approve $700,000 of supplemental funding, like that bucket exists, if I only need 650, it will only be 650. So it's not just a one-time cash flush for Bert Nash. It is invoiced on a monthly basis based on actuals.
I want to check on that because I saw Sarah going like this and you saying, yeah.
Yeah, so I guess, my understanding of this was that this was a one-time, ask for solvency for the TRC. You would get this amount up front. What it would impact, I think, would be the back end, what you would potentially bill under your regular Bert Nash proper contract for the TRC related to uncompensated care or sliding fee scale. And that's how I was understanding it.
Yeah.
We didn't know that was an option, but nonetheless, that means that if that money is upfront, then
Then
it
the other-
equals out in terms
yes.
of not paying
Right.
for.
It just
actual-
comes out of the other pocket.
Still
yeah.
wouldn't take more than we need.
Yeah, they can't bill us. They cannot invoice us for things they have not incurred.
And another change, which I think is important, new administration, past administration, is that TRC is now invoicing us for actuals every month. In the prior model, because the KDAD's funding came to the county was paying a regular allocation regardless. And as that budget surplus, which we both discovered was what it was and why it was, we've made that change. And so again, I think there will be more integrity to the numbers and the understanding as they come in month to month. And the county can have a lot more confidence that we are really reimbursing Bert Nash for the actual expense as we move month to month. And if there's a surplus at the end, it's not really a surplus, because remember, you've required that it be a zero balance. The contract has required that it be a zero balance.
Thank you.
So now I have questions. Bob or Sarah or whoever, Bert Nash will give us an invoice for $700,000 and we will pay that invoice.
You vote to approve that tonight, yes.
Okay.
But then they will continue to invoice us every month based off of actuals received and other revenues incurred. And if they still have they still have the initial 1.6 million, plus as we've realigned their 2026 service agreement, they have access to $700,000 of potential uncompensated care for crisis system work, which would include MRT and TRC.
And that in effect could go in the bank so they don't have to use their short-term credit facility to make payroll or.
They still have to
whatever
bill
else.
us actuals on that. On the other pieces of this budget, they still have to bill us actuals. So it wouldn't go in the bank.
Okay.
It does help support cash flow, of course. Bert Nash as an entity is, cash poor. So we do rely on our line of credit that is getting better ultimately to be in the position we all want to be in, which is, again, not kind of robbing Peter to pay Paul internally, is that we're able to build, I would say replenish, but they have to exist first. We have build cash reserves. And so this kind of helps bridge that gap.
Other questions, commissioners, at this time? Okay, well, thank you for all that information so far.
Stop sharing.
Yeah, thank you, Sarah. And we may have more questions for you in a moment, but since this is a regular business item, it is available as with all items for public comment. So if there's anybody here this evening who would like to make public comment on this item, feel free to come forward. And a reminder for anybody who might be listening online, if you wish to make a public comment on this item, please raise your hand virtually so staff know to call on you. Thanks, Jake.
John M. 66049. Sorry to be a stickler here, but certain triggers stay in my mind, so I'm going to bring them up. Thank you for asking about the consultant. I thought for a while, the way everybody was talking, that consultant was finished and I missed it, but it's still out there. And back in December, when this discussion started, there was a trigger on a consultant doing a bit of work and getting that work back to you all before money was going to be released. And here we are talking about voting on whether to release that money. And that consultant is still busy writing up their final report, which I guess is going to be due in a few weeks. I think I understood enough. I have a small mind, but I think I understood enough that there's been a lot of work to identify gaps and holes in the monies that are needed. Questions were asked whether that's going to be reoccurring. We may or may not know. The consultant may inform us of things that need to be done so it doesn't reoccur. There was some indication in the initial consultant statement that revenue cycle processes are being looked at. So we expect some more from the consultant. And there was a concern that the TRC costs and revenues were integrated within the broader Burton Nash system. Now, maybe those integrations have been identified and started to be pulled apart, but nevertheless, there was nothing reflective in the briefing showing us how the changes that would be implemented so reoccurrence would not occur. And like I say, maybe the consultant will illuminate us so that they don't reoccur. We do want to isolate the true cost of crisis stabilization operations, including the cost of readiness and service delivery. And without the fine line being drawn between what the actual costs of the TRC within the broader Burton Nash, that's going to be difficult to gain confidence that it's not going to happen again. So speaking for myself, of course, I'm a little nervous that we really know that all this is not going to reoccur. Thank you.
Thank you, John. Is there anybody else here in the building who would like to provide public comment on this item? All right, see no takers. Any virtual hands, Sarah? Okay, go ahead and close public comment and bring it back to the commission for further thoughts, discussions, motions, questions too.
I still have more questions, but I also will lead off with a comment about how exciting it is to have numbers. and I know it's been a tremendous amount of work, and that's not just numbers that are coming to us that are reliable and that where we can dig in and ask questions, but also back to the organization and the boards. And I think that, getting program specific budgets that, all parties are aware of and can agree on is a game changer. And it's just a phenomenal kind of sea change in how we, how we partner, how we help, because I think it answers one of those kind of longstanding questions we've had is, Burton Nash asks for more money, but they didn't use the money we set aside in the first place. So what's the disconnect there? And I think that was frustrating on both sides. And now I think we're understanding a little bit more why that is. And I think probably the biggest win out of this work, other than the relationships and getting good numbers, is the understanding of reworking the funding that has been allocated to be useful. And I think that that's probably the game changer that makes the one-time funding more reliably one-time, is that I think for a long time have had this disconnect in funding available versus funding utilized. And I think that that's a really positive framework that we're getting to. So I wanted to say that for sure. I also asked for and Burton Nash provided the 2025 actuals, which just because it's been a long time since we've had numbers that we could rely on from here. And so I really wanted to understand the organization better. And I have a couple of questions about some of that if Danny or Dr. Watkins is interested in answering some questions there. And one of them is just kind of broadly the role of the endowment funding. How much is there? It looks like it's being used still pretty regularly. Is the idea to try and wean away from that, or is that just an ongoing part of how the endowment's supposed to function?
So in 2025, there was a large withdrawal from the endowment to help BNC operations as a whole. So again, from a cash influx perspective, it was to help bridge that gap. Going forward, no, the endowment should be relatively untouched unless for specific objectives that are mutually, agreed on and hopefully pre-planned for. But otherwise, there's a typical 5% withdrawal on an annual basis that we target certain trainings or other projects for that 5% to support. So there was, again, what a one-time withdrawal from that last year to help support broader BNC operation and keep the lights on.
So on an ongoing basis for budgets, we'd still likely see whatever that 5% number is that comes in kind of as a healthy, that's their intention to help support Burton Nash operations. Okay, thanks. Another question, this is just more curiosity, I guess. The YRC fundraising is listed as a revenue, and then kind of after your net, you kind of draw that back out. But I guess in my mind that clouds things a little because those aren't operational funds. Those are dedicated, capital funds. Can you just talk about
Yes.
that process?
So just like the endowment, so there's unrestricted and restricted funds. YRC funds are meant to fund the YRC. And so while those fundraising dollars are ultimately recognized in the revenue section, those are then set aside not to be used for any operational purposes. So that's why you have to kind of do that like back of napkin math at the bottom to get a true sense of what Bert Nash operations actually look like without the clouding of the YRC dollars.
And so it changes the conversation or the 2025 from like a net income of 650,000. And then below that, you've pulled out the YRC capital fundraising revenue of the 1.2 million. And then something called 2025 invoices is another. And then we get to like a net loss of about 700,000 from 2025, right?
Yes. And again, the income statement shared with you all is unaudited. So technically, our annual audit doesn't kick off until not next week, but the week after. And so there will be some end of year adjustments, and 2025 was a rough year. No one wants to repeat. So that number will likely get a little uglier, but we're doing everything across the board to ensure that that's not a reality anymore.
And so, and the numbers in the unaudited, and I recognize things change with the audit in ways that no one understands, but maybe you do. But also those numbers match pretty well what went out in the annual report that was handed out at the Pioneer event. But it shows this net income gain, and I recognize that makes for a great story until publicly coming for dollars and saying we've got a $700,000 deficit, and I know that's for 26 and not 25, but like that. As we kind of communicate in the community, like where taxpayer dollars go, like it's kind of hard to have, and I know it's because the YRC fundraising was included in the revenue side of that, but it isn't actually useful for operations. So like it's just an awkward conversation to help explain to people that yes, the document they put out is both true and but it shows a net income that is not actionable. I think we as representatives of the taxpayers might need some more like help communicating that we tell people at an event where we celebrate a lot, but also kind of be honest with the community and not dishonest, but just to make sure that the story you tell us that we have an operating loss is the same that goes out in the publications that says currently we have an operating gain. So
yes. So I'll just say for the annual report, I work closely with community engagement on a number of footnotes to try to get to the true story. Unfortunately, this gets very complicated very fast, and I understand somehow people aren't as interested in the mechanisms of accrual accounting as I am. But so yes, agreed. Those are nice round numbers for an annual report, but ultimately, and again, with revenue dollars earned versus cash in the door, like there's a disconnect there. But I hope, if nothing else, between December and tonight and ongoing conversations, we're willing to have any of those conversations and are transparent and forthcoming about what's actually going on.
I appreciate it, and it helps us to communicate like what actions do we take here if we decide to move forward with here's a $700,000 insolvency funding for an organization that also shows publicly that they had a gain. So.
And that's part of our task and part of our goal. I mean, for someone who's not as excited about accrual accounting as Danny is, I mean, it's a challenging task for us to be able to tell the story of our numbers and the complexity of that story. But nonetheless, I think that's something that we have made great strides in and are continuing to refine how we explain what that means to even someone like me, who is not an accountant, but is clearly interested in the numbers.
And I'll say more broadly, talking about the TRC for a second, it's a forced zero budget. And so I would say, generally speaking, across the board, numbers being taken at face value, there's a lot of churn that happens underneath that number that might not show up based on the number presented. And ultimately, like that is my job. Like it is my job to be the translator to help tell the story of those numbers and make it real in a way that won't put you to sleep, but is also, understandable for folks. Yeah, yeah.
We'll take all the nerdy you can throw at us. That's what we're here for. We may not all get it the first time around and keep asking the same question, but
Yeah, and hey, I welcome all questions. If I can't explain it, then I need to dig into it more. That's it.
And the other piece, and I'm struggling to find where I took the notes on it, showed in the 2026, and I can't remember, because I know there was an asterisk that addressed a little bit, and it was, it was in the budget for 2026 that was adopted in January 26. And it talks about the numbers of money owed back to city and county, or it kind of touched on that for Rockledge project. And I know that those numbers, there's clarity that's been coming with that also since January. So I'm not so much hung up on the number there, but like,
Sure.
what's the plan for addressing, getting a really solid number, and then how we continue to have that conversation about Rockledge?
Yes. So the money due to capital projects is the kind of line item asterisk that you're likely talking about. I'll do a momentary recall to some of the PPS RCM offsets that we talked about. You kind of throw spaghetti at a wall. Like, we didn't want to not acknowledge that there is a liability there that's very real, but based on what ultimately happens with that land and the grant that we could potentially transfer, we don't know. The part of the equation that we know now that we didn't know in January when that was officially approved is the YRC fundraising. The YRC account is entirely whole. So after reconciling and re-reconciling and verifying and double verifying, that number is set. It's all good. It's all there. Based on what happens with Rockledge, there's a very real chance that that liability is bigger. But ultimately, that's not okay. It's decided today that Bert Nash owes back money. It's not that that comes due tomorrow. It's likely that it's an installment payment over some period of time, which, again, we want to make right. We want to make whole. But I don't really love just picking a number and going with it. But we ultimately thought that between the two, that number seemed okay for what we might owe in 2026.
And yeah, I agree. There's been a lot to work through that you inherited, that both of you inherited with that. But I want to make sure that we stay current and moving on the conversation, because we don't yet have a plan for it, or a plan, I don't believe yet, to sell the land, because I don't know that another builder is wanting it for this project. They might want a project someplace else, but trying to make some steps to that we can, again, communicate to the taxpayers how this is being made whole.
And we do have a meeting scheduled with some of those folks who are involved in Rockledge. So with city administrators, some county administrators, the housing authority, that we have a meeting scheduled to start some of those discussions, all in the same room, virtually, technically, in July.
Okay, thanks.
To clarify something you said about the 5% of endowment, that's 5% of the endowment fund, not 5% of your budget. Is that correct?
Yes, the endowment. Yeah. So 5% of the unrestricted, and then the different restricted funds have different requirements for withdrawal, but ultimately it averages out to 5%.
For the consultant's final report, have you been in communication with them?
Regularly. I mean, we had a meeting this morning.
Yeah.
Some of them, they presented in the county meeting. Forget the letters for that meeting that we had on Monday. So we are in regular weekly conversation with them. And, as we've discussed, we have seen the preliminary report. We've had all of these conversations. I think we have some inklings to some of the recommendations that they will have in that report, and are looking forward to it, just like all of us.
Okay, so you've seen some of the recommendations or some of the preliminary recommendations that will be coming forward in the final report.
Well, no, we've seen the preliminary report that all of us have seen, but in conversations, I think we're picking up on some of the inklings of the things that they are interested in, the types of questions, and some of the areas that we share concerns and goals for the next steps for TRC.
Okay, and do you have any hesitation or concerns in what you're hearing as you're moving towards their final recommendations?
I do not. I do not have any concerns. I've been really pleased with our engagement with them and their understanding of the complexities of all the things we've been talking about. And again, I'm looking forward to what that final report provides for us, but have no concerns about what might be in that report at this time.
Okay,
Commissioner.
thank you. And then from the county's perspective, do you have any concerns with what
What I
you're
wanted to
hearing?
share was two things. The letters are DCCRC, Douglas County
Thank
Crisis
you.
Response Coalition, right? Which you'll remember you endorsed and set up. So this was our fourth meeting since that body was set up. And at that meeting, Chief Darling from EMS and Jonathan Smith, all of those players are there. So the consultant's report has been not just shared, but then also discussed in that setting. It's been shared and discussed in the TRC County monthly check-ins. And so it's not just a issue about TRC and the county. It's how does TRC fit into the overall system of care, right? And so the interviews during the review were with EMS, with law enforcement, with our SUD partners, with peers. So all of that has been a part of this process as we intended for the process to be thorough and to not be focused on an evaluation or report card. Is TRC meeting all the things that the county, right? It's been a consultation of how does TRC fit into the overall system of care and what have we learned in response to how that system moves forward. So that is a new body, but that body has very much been engaged because of this process in looking at it systemically instead of facility.
Okay, thank you. So it's more than just checking a box.
Absolutely.
Thank you.
And that was just the preliminary report or the initial report that work is being done with that, but we still don't have the final report.
Yes.
Okay.
And then that work will be done around the final report and the recommendations. So the work definitely goes on well beyond May 30th. And when I say will go on, I mean for, several more months, right? So I think that's important to consider here in terms of when and why the decision was come to revisit the ask now for this one-time funding.
And when you say several more months, I'm also thinking potentially into 2027. I would see possibly some of those recommendations rolling into 27, because
Oh.
it does seem like
Yeah.
there's a large body of work there.
Oh, certainly. I mean,
Okay.
there are some items that we are already addressing and are aware of and can be more short term, but there are many things we've discussed already that are much longer projects and will most certainly carry over to 2027.
Okay, thank you.
Including advocacy at the state level,
Mhm.
which is something we can benefit from the guidance and the experience of those consultants nationally and their ability to also talk to KDADs as Bert Nash talks to KDADs and we as partners talk to KDADs about TRC.
Thank you.
And I would also chime in, Commissioner Anderson. I mean, this is just one commissioner's opinion, but for me, that the TRC consultation report and the sort of the agreements we came to collectively about what to assess and what to try and glean from that process were significantly related to the fact that we are looking at a contract renewal for the TRC, so that we're at this coming to an end of, a 3-year initial contract and trying to really get our bearings straight and on the same page about how it's been going, how it fits into the larger crisis system, and what the opportunities and challenges are that we need to keep sort of in the forefront of our mind about renewal of a TRC contract and thinking about what operations for the next coming years come for. So at least from my perspective, that was the significant catalyst for seeking this opportunity for a consultation and to have a report with some recommendations that are TRC specific, but in the context of the larger crisis system. And, moving forward with the things we need to stay focused on as sort of acute challenges, if you will, about what the next few years might look like, and the whole picture of that from the financials to the staffing and workforce challenges to the extent to which TRC's role exists within that full continuum of care that we've been working to build out. So I see it as less tied to, certainly not directly tied to this solvency request, in my opinion. Well, it was part of the conversation that this commission made a strong impression on Bert Nash that this report and this consultation opportunity was important to us and an important step moving forward and talking about solvency dollars and future budget requests, for 2027, right on the horizon, and then future contract is a much more global process, I suppose, as I saw it, versus being tied to this request per se. And I'm hopeful that, and it seems like so far it's been a really productive and positive process, and that the outcome does give us some concrete ideas about how to think about our money decision-making, but also the coordination and collaboration amongst all of the partners within the system, because we have more clarity about what each of those program budgets are and program services are, and what's different or unique about them, and how do they all complement each other and bolster each other, and how do we make sure that we are staying engaged with the state in a meaningful way that based on advocacy and the opportunity to have them investing in this work alongside us and not us subsidizing what the state might be expecting of us at times.
I'm really encouraged by sort of the separation of TRC. That was something that came out of the consultant report of the TRC, and I think I heard Bob call it Bert Nash proper. I don't know what that means, but I guess I'm starting to understand that. I think, just to share with you all, that's an easier story to tell. When we get them all muddied together, while it may make sense to the Bert Nash board and Bert Nash, for us, it becomes really, really cloudy. And I think when we got into the Rockledge project, it got really cloudy on where that money, was it capital? Was it used for operations? How does it relate to the TRC? And what I'm hearing tonight is really encouraging. Like, we need to think about what we're specifically trying to do at the TRC and what county dollars are going towards. And, I've been really trying to discipline myself, not getting into these other, because tonight is about the TRC funding, and that solvency funding that we've identified a gap. But I hope, and it does seem like, that it sort of sets the table for future conversations about how we think about funding programs, how we think about what funding goes to Bert Nash, and that Bert Nash and the TRC contract, while they certainly have overlaps, it's really important to talk about them a little bit separately, because of, and that's what came out, what I heard in the consultant report is they are very different things. Doing outpatient is very different than doing emergency services. So this feels to me like a really good way of structuring that conversation when we talk about the Youth Recovery Center. And just remember, when we say YRC, not everybody knows what that is. When we talk about YRC, I think that needs to be sort of in a separate category as well, because at this time we don't provide any funding for that. And so I just want to make sure we don't get in that habit again of just putting it all into one big pot and sort of saying, well, this went to pay for that and this went to pay for that. And it does sound like you're getting more clarity. You're working with staff to get more clarity. I want to thank staff for sticking with it, because there was a time when I'm not sure we would have. The whole attitude and culture here is very different than we were December, November of last year. And that's really encouraging to me. So thank you for that, and thanks staff for that.
So I think that was probably aimed at me, which is totally okay. Because I've taken not only just TRC questions, but kind of asked back into the organization as a whole, in part because we couldn't before. There just weren't the numbers there to do it. And I'm tying it all into, solvency for TRC is also solvency over the organization that supports and runs TRC. So I appreciate your patience that I've been kind of asking of some more global questions. And also because when budget time comes around, we'll talk about many of these same things and we won't have as much time. So I just appreciate being called on that it's a habit. So I'm really glad to be able to to talk through that. It was also mentioned a couple of times with staff and commissioners about state support. And I think they've also helped with some, supplementals or solvency kind of conversations in the past. Has there been a request within this also to go back to KDADS and ask for supplemental funding?
Not at the moment. We've not had conversations about that. However, we have ongoing discussions with KDADS and are also preparing our requests for next year for them. So those are always active conversations that we're having with both the county and KDADS, but at this point, no.
And I know we've also kind of, I should say, drew the Rockledge conversation in also. And I just, because there's just moving pieces of the whole, and part of that's the community conversation too. I just want to make sure that we can solidify some planning around that prior to our budget conversation. I just think that will help smooth things over in terms of how we have that larger budget conversation too. And maybe that's just me, but I think in terms of timing, it'd be really nice to have some steps with some forward motion on that.
They're absolutely committed to that.
I'm not sure
and-
we're going to have those conversations before budget, though.
Yeah,
I mean,
that initial.
The meetings are scheduled for after we complete our budget process.
You won't even meet until after the budget.
Correct.
It's quite difficult to schedule that many people together and have schedules aligned. So that was the first available time we could get all of those people together. But that doesn't mean that conversations aren't happening already, and we are fully committed to making progress on those. And again, being able to come to you with updates as soon as possible.
Thanks.
Yeah, commissioners, I think we're ready for a motion. I'll make one last comment, which is just to say that I really do appreciate the diligent work that went into this, and the fact that for the first time in a long time, I feel much more confident about my understanding of how and where dollars are going, and that it's just been a work in progress for all of the reasons that have been mentioned here tonight, I think, and still some reasons maybe that are being unpacked, that there's significantly more clarity than I have felt in my time as a commissioner in general. And I feel happy about the progress. And I also feel glad about the fact that I'm hearing the same thing from both our staff and Bert Nash staff, which is that there's an agreement that there's more clarity and more understanding, and that this discovery about program-specific budgets and how helpful that is to everybody involved, both the administrative staff and policymakers and the public. I think that goes a long way towards my confidence that that the number that we have before us is a solid number, will help achieve solvency to a point for the TRC that has us on much more as stable footing as we can with the other unknowns moving forward. So I feel very good about that, and am appreciative of the work so far, and the fact that I think that our conversation has gotten much healthier and sincerely transparent throughout this process, and I'm grateful for that part. If commissioners don't have any other questions, then I'm ready for a motion.
I maybe have one more. So we set aside $1 million of contingency for crisis. So is there another request coming for the balance of this, or you don't think so at this time? Okay.
I'm ready to make a motion. I would echo our chair here that I'm really thrilled to have numbers that we can dig into and understand where we're coming from and why this helps, and have a number that fits the need. I'm very excited to see that this be used for one time to kind of get everybody back on track. But I would make the motion unless anybody else needs something. Okay. I move to approve Bert Nash's revised one-time TRC supplemental funding request for 2026, not to exceed 700,000.
Second.
Moved and seconded. All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Aye. All right, passes unanimously. Thank you, Bert Nash. Thank you, staff, for your work on this. And thank you, public, for staying engaged and offering your comments. With that, we will move on to our second and last business item of the evening, which is, I think, something I'm turning over to Jill Joliker to introduce for us.
Good evening, Commissioners. Before you is a request to allow the county administrator to sign a FY 2025 U.S. Department of Housing and Urban Development Continuum of Care Grant Agreement. It is a 2025 grant. The cycle on this is really delayed. As I provided in the background information, Douglas County submitted an application for renewal funding of $321,032 on October 22nd, 2024 to HUD for a renewal of the Continuum of Care grant to provide permanent supportive housing for 12 chronically homeless individuals. Again, that was a renewal of a grant that we had originally received. And traditionally, those renewal grants are pretty streamlined, and we expected that same amount of funding and on a somewhat normal timeline. None of that came through. The amount of funding that was ultimately awarded, and we actually got the documentation for, and Brooke has been able to verify that that funding has been allocated in the online system that HUD uses, is $156,864. And that grant agreement is attached. And there is a limitation on how those dollars can be utilized. What was that authorized amount is specific to solely to leases. So that's how we will be using that funding to support the 12 individuals that have maintained housing because of the funding that Douglas County authorized in the 2025 budget and ongoing funding in the 2026 budget to act as a backstop, if you will, for those federal dollars. And because of that funding, we've been able to, again, keep those 12 chronically homeless individuals housed, and we'll use this grant to continue to pay the leases for those individuals. What that means is that there will be additional funds left over in the general fund where you all authorize that additional backstop funding. I have no idea what the funding, what the future looks like. This grant is, we expect a release of the NOFO for notice of funding opportunity for the next round of the Continuum of Care grant. And we do intend to apply because any amount that we get will offset the county's commitment, whether that's coming from the general fund or coming from the behavioral health sales tax, where our flexible housing pool funding comes from, which is essentially the same program. So that's our plan. But again, there's no sense of certainty about the timing of that. And so staff is committed to leveraging federal dollars as appropriate, but it remains really uncertain. I'm happy to, it's a funky topic, but I'm happy to try to answer questions and sort anything out that you may have.
Thank you, Jill. Any questions, commissioners? Clear as mud when we're getting money from the federal government these days.
I did want to say there is one section of this. I got notification from our regions, from not the regional administrator, but our regional grant contractor last week, that as a result of a federal lawsuit against the administration on some of the stipulations in this, there's some specific language here in this grant agreement that none of the entities will be held accountable to. So addendum A in this document talks about some specific, there's some specific language regarding gender conformity and other aspects of the addendum that were incredibly troublesome. And thanks to national advocacy on the part of Corporation for Supportive Housing, certainly a friend to Douglas County in the past, and the National Alliance to End Homelessness, that lawsuit was successful. And so this is no longer, those portions are no longer enforceable. So we will still, we've been directed to sign the agreement as is. It's not enforceable, and we are not obligated to follow those in there.
That clarification, Jill. No questions, commissioners?
This may have been a comment, but is there a way for us, so we have this balance of the 321, because we thought it might completely go away. Is it, I mean, I'd be interested, commissioners as well, maybe this is part of our discussion. As we think about the next year's budget, is it helpful to know which dollars we sort of had assigned to this? And is it helpful to kind of keep that in mind going forth? Or is it better to just start the budget over again? You see what I'm saying? I mean, we sort of put this aside for supportive housing.
Well, we budgeted for it. Yeah. It wasn't in contingency. It was planned for.
Right. I guess I'm not being very clear. So my contingency being that we didn't know what the grant amount was.
Sure. So
Right.
During reestimate, we will reestimate this and
Yeah.
tell you what is needed for the remainder of 26. I think then it'll be a decision for the 27 budget process of how much certainty do you want to put in this ongoing funding amount moving forward? Or do you want to keep capacity to be able to fund it, if I'm interpreting where I think you're headed?
Yeah, I'm not totally sure where I'm headed, but I think that's what I'm saying.
Yeah, I think that's what and I just think I want to look at the totality of where we get everything with the budget before we make some of those kind of recommendations to the commission.
Yeah, I'm just noting that this is the second time we've sort of put money and haven't spent it all, is what I'm getting at here.
Right, which is why I'm sort of tempted to perhaps lower the allocation and then see how it goes. But it's a little soon for me to commit to that in the budget yet.
Okay.
I would say though that, in total, because these dollars are used as part of the larger flexible housing program budget. This is just a component of that budget. So $600,000 was authorized for the flexible housing program, and then $321,000 was authorized as part of when we mushed them together.
But they're still technically separate in our budget because one's in the general fund.
Yes.
One's in the general fund and one's in the behavioral health fund.
Yes.
So I think we can just splice it out as we figure out how we bring it to you in budget.
So for 12 households, if I'm understanding this correctly, 12 households are being funded with $321,000. Is that correct?
That's the budget for those 12 households. Yes.
Okay. And so that comes out to approximately $202,229.
Mhm.
Okay. For rent, utilities, and
Supportive services.
yeah, necessary
The
supportive housing services.
That's the part that we were not funded for by HUD this year.
Okay. And then do we know per household, because we haven't really seen a presentation just yet from MHAH?
It's in like 2 weeks.
Okay, so we don't quite know just yet what rent, utilities, and necessary supportive housing services really looks like for each of these 12 households. So we don't really know the outcomes that we're getting for $321,032.
That'll be part of the conversation in 2 weeks when we talk about that project. It is still relatively new. What we do know is that we're keeping 12 people that were homeless off from homelessness. That we definitely know.
Okay, and then these 12 individuals or 12 households, what else? So what else do we know about these 12 households?
Well,
Or we don't know just yet.
our hope was to bring that to you in the presentation in a couple weeks.
Okay,
I can tell you anecdotally that those individuals, they've maintained their housing. They've ended cycles of chronic homelessness. This grant is specific to it. It's 100% dedicated, which in HUD speak is they're required to be documented as chronically homeless. So the data that you're going to see next week is we're able to demonstrate what's happened since these individuals have been housed in terms of utilization of emergency services that we have access to through MyRC. So that's just one example, but what HUD cares about when we submit our data to HUD, which we've done through the cycle of getting this grant the first year and this upcoming cycle. They want to see metrics of, again, maintaining housing. They want to see income coming into the home as much as possible. So that means that staff have to be, that supportive housing teams are putting those folks through the SOAR process, the qualification or disability process, so that there's some income coming in to offset the funding that's going to pay the rent and utility assistance. They also want to see things, are they getting connected to primary care providers? There's a whole host of things that HUD is measuring us to accomplish with this grant each year that inevitably is HUD, and the continuum of care looks at the performance metrics that are submitted in the homeless management information system that we're required to submit. And that's what ultimately gives them the information they know that it's a successful program.
And are these individuals housed in Douglas County?
Yes.
Okay, all right. And then do we know, are they housed in Lawrence, or where they're housed in Douglas County?
All of them are almost exclusively housed in Lawrence.
Okay.
And that's largely just access to services, proximity, and landlords that are willing to be great partners to us. And because of master lease, a lot of these folks historically have been on master lease agreements that started through Burt Nash and have transitioned over to Mental Health America. Having that master lease in place is a best practice with supportive housing for folks that face some of the highest barriers in terms of because of their rental history.
And some of these households, do they have children?
No, none of these 12 households. Flexible housing program, I know for sure we do have one household. It's a single mom with a couple kids.
Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
Since we're already managing these 12 households with the 321,000, does that mean the 165 will enable us to serve another 6 households?
I think that'll be a decision that you can make as a part of the 2027 budget process.
I'm sorry, I didn't hear you.
So we're going to bring that to you as a part of the 2027 budget process.
So we get the money in 2027, not
No,
26?
we get it now for 2026, and then you can decide if you want to expand the program and as a part of the budget process, or if you want to lower what we've contributed to it and use that money somewhere
replace
else.
it.
Yes, and use that money somewhere else.
And the way I read the agreement, this has to be used for rent only.
Correct.
Thanks.
I just have one more question. These 12 chronically homeless individuals, are these, since they entered the program, are we still supporting the same 12 chronically homeless individuals, or have some fallen out of the program and then others have entered the program since we've started it?
I think turnover wise, I want to say it's been 4, maybe 5 that exited the program. I want to say 1 or 2, I would say successfully. They were ready to move on to another, their transitional voucher that they've been on a waiting list for, or their Section 8 voucher came up, and they chose to move on with that. Others
So kind of like graduate to another
yes,
stable living environment.
yes.
Thank you.
But then there have been others that the level of support that was needed was not there, and a lot of that was why we switched providers.
Okay, so then they chose not to stay or were not able to stay in that environment?
Correct, because they did not have the level of support that was needed, and because they chose not to participate anymore.
Was the team able to find them alternate housing?
They sought to do that, and we are obligated to provide the individual with a hearing to try to understand what is the next best step. That's what Housing First is. We're obligated to offer a next step. But if that individual is not willing to engage in those conversations, then unfortunately their next step is it's the ball's in their court.
Okay, thank you.
And folks can come back to this program. They can get re-entered into the coordinated entry system, and they're probably still going to score high and qualify for either flexible housing pool or this program because of their history of homelessness. So they can always get back in line again and be considered.
And will these individuals be part of the data that we will see within the HIMSS database that you currently update? Or no, will we not see this?
They'll be included in the numbers that are shared with you. Yes, we don't have access directly to HMIS, and the data that you're going to see is going to be de-identified. So it's going to be
Yes, I know.
a big
Yeah.
number.
Okay, I just
Yeah.
want to know if they're part of the overall data set.
It should be, yes.
Okay. Thank you.
Any other questions for now, commissioners? Okay, we'll go ahead and open, go ahead and open this up for public comment. Invite anybody who's here that wishes to provide public comment on this item to come forward. Going once, going twice. No virtual hands, it looks like, Sarah. Okay, we will close public comment on this item and bring it back to the commission for any further discussion, comments, or motions.
I would make a motion if you're ready. I move to authorize the county administrator to sign a grant agreement with the U.S. Department of Housing and Urban Development for fiscal year 2025 Continuum of Care grant to provide permanent supportive housing to 12 households.
Second.
Moved and seconded. All those in favor, please say aye. Aye. All right, it passes unanimously. Thank you, Jill, for the update. Thank you, commissioners, for the questions and discussion. That concludes our business agenda for the evening, and we will move on to appointments. I have noted that we've got one reappointment queued up for our, oh my gosh.
Heritage
my
Conservation
HCC,
Council.
Heritage Conservation Council, thank you. And so I'm happy to make a motion for to reappoint Leonard Ortiz for a second term that he's expressed interest in to the Heritage Conservation Council.
Happy to make the motion.
Thank you. I move to reappoint Leonard Ortiz to the HCC for a second term. Thank you, Commissioner.
Second.
Moved and seconded. All those in favor, please say aye.
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 Great. That appointment passes unanimously. Did any other commissioners have appointments they need to discuss this evening or queued up? Okay, then we will move on to Commissioner and Administrator Miscellaneous and start with Sarah's memo.
Thank you, commissioners. My memo is attached. Our scheduled dates are getting a little smaller. We're getting through some of the craziness of spring events, but there are a few in there. Next week, you do not have a work session. And then at the 5:30 meeting, we will be talking about the biggest item that we're going to be talking about is the truancy program next week. And then also we lose Commissioner Willie for the next 3 weeks. So just want to note that Commissioner Willie will be gone for the next 3 weeks. After next week, you have work sessions solid at 4 o'clock through up to budget. So you're planning your calendar accordingly. That's all I've got, commissioners.
Thank you, Sarah. Other commissioners have any miscellaneous items that they want to bring up? Go for it.
I think to be legal with Bert Nash, we need some kind of addendum or amendment to that operating agreement for the 700,000.
Yes, you authorized us to put that in the amendment. So yeah, we will put it on paper and have it executed.
Commissioners, I just had a couple of scheduling things. I wanted to see, I think Robin probably has most of the dates that we've been told about that multiple commissioners might be at, but one I haven't seen on here is that the Farm Bureau dinner is coming up soon. I know I'm attending that. I just wanted to double check if there were 2 other commissioners attending. It looks like there are 3 of us.
Can
so-
you forward me that
Yes,
information? They never do.
Got it. Yep, I will find it. And it was
Okay.
a while back that I RSVP'd quite a while ago and realized it's coming up on my calendar. So I'll make sure Robin gets that. Are there any other things on commissioners' calendars that you flagged as something that there might be several of us at?
Last night, but it's too late for that.
I didn't, but the landlord's lunch conversation is tomorrow. I can't go, and I was really hoping that
Friday.
It was Friday. Friday. Okay, it's Friday. I know I had a scheduling conflict, so yeah, it's Friday during graduation party. So I can't go, but I was really hoping to attend, and I'm hoping that there's like another commissioner that's going to go and can report back on
I'm
that.
planning on attending.
Okay, thanks.
And then the one other thing I wanted to bring up, just sort of briefly, maybe you all can chew on it and I can bring it up in miscellaneous again next week if you want a minute to think about it. But per our discussion about the sort of discussing with each other if possibilities for commissioner travel exist. There's something that I'm talking with staff about, another NACO event that's coming up in September, an energy symposium. And I got a little bit more detail about that today in my policy steering committee, and I'm going to revisit it with Sean and zoning and code staff and trying to determine whether or not we think there's any value in possibly a staff member and a commissioner attending. It's a 2-day symposium that's really broadly focused on every piece of the energy sector and consolidated at a site visit in the panhandle of Texas, where it would be meeting with lots of county officials and then visiting multiple different types of energy sites. So I just wanted to put that out there, and if any commissioner has any strong feeling about interest in and desire in learning more about that and potentially attending, or has a strong feeling about whether or not they think it's a good use of county resources to potentially attend that. Happy, Sarah's got the information and so she can pass it along to you. It's a pretty skeleton agenda right now, but I did get a little bit more detail in a face-to-face meeting today to kind of understand that, so.
Did you say when and where that is?
Oh, it's September 23rd to 25th, and it's based out of Amarillo, Texas, and it's a multi-county area of different site visits and different county officials.
Might be worth pitching to our zoning and code staff to see if they have a burning desire to go. A lot of those conversations fall heavily on them, and if they wanted some backup.
Yep. Yeah, that's the conversation that we're having. So I still sort of gauging it, but I definitely got the memo today that their registration is starting to get full. So better decide sooner rather than later. So I just welcome maybe in the coming week, if any commissioners have a strong feeling about it one way or the other, to reach out to me directly or to pass that along to Sarah.
I'd say a lot of that energy work has felt big and daunting and like we're working in a vacuum. I'd say the more kind of learning process and learning from other counties especially would be really helpful. I mean, I might be interested in going, but I think it's probably more important to get zoning and codes staff there if they wanted to go. We're looking dollar for dollar.
All right. Well, thanks for the immediate feedback. And if there's nothing else from any other commissioners for the good of the order, then we are adjourned for tonight. Thanks, everybody.